Welcome to the next lesson. Today we are going to be getting into styling number 6, or CSS number 6, styling text. So make your way over to my website and scroll down to CSS 6, where you have the PDF, video, and glitch template to help you out. Let's take a look at the PDF. And we will be adding stylings to a P class. We'll be added to a P element. We'll be adding classes to a center and right class, which are custom classes that are made. Then just adding styling to a UL native tag. And then getting into hovers and active class. I'm not sure if active class will work, but we can give it a shot. And then a little bit of an advanced CSS section. We'll be uncommenting some code and adding some of these stylings to see a special effect that can be done in CSS that would appear to be JavaScript but isn't. Now, in this lesson, we're going to get started as we usually do, but there will be some code already written for us, as we saw in the previous CSS lesson, that we'll be adding to. So, if you're here on WebDev CSS 6 Master in the glitch template, all you got to do is hit the Remix to Edit button, rename your file, and you're good to go. So, scrolling down, we'll see the first challenge, which is new styles and properties in CSS, with a step-by-step addition to different stylings we're going to make, and then we'll see the changes in real time. Let's just see how our page looks now, just right off the bat. This is actually a little cumbersome here, but we'll just have to ignore that. And we have just some HTML text on the page. So you can actually, let me just bring this down. There we go. So we see an unordered list there. We see a regular numbered list. We see a link, and then left, center, right, just text. I assume they have some classes to those names as well. We'll play around with it, go step by step by the instructions through the advanced section, then maybe I'll reiterate and add some things as we go. So let's get started. Let's take a look at our directions. Now I'm going to have it open on another screen. 1 second. And you can scroll over to your index.html to take a look. So we see the text with the accompanying class right there, the link, the unordered list, and the ordered list. So let's see what step 1 is. In the P declaration, add the following. So here's our P tags. Our styling is going to say every single P tag on this screen receive the following properties and attributes. First one we're going to do is font family, which is what determines the font that you're going to be using on those elements. So Helvetica should be built in, and if it's spelled correctly, it should work. We're going to change the font size, and in CSS, changing font size is font-size to 1.4 EM. EM is a CSS size. 1 EM is about 16 pixels, so 1.4 would be around 24, 25. EM is a way to simplify the act of making text on the screen different sizes. It has a lot to do with different devices, and can be relative or not relative. Pretty much right now, look at 1.4 EM as just a little bit bigger than usual font size, if 16px being the baseline regular kind. But if you feel more comfortable, you can start off by just doing 16px. And why don't we do that, and we'll change it back to 1.4 so you can see the subtle difference. For text color, we don't do text color as you would imagine. It's just the term color, and that is handling all the text in this particular P element, and we want that text to be the color blue. And line height, really don't know. Could be the letters, could be the space in which the letters contain. We'll see if we can pay attention to that. Let's comment it out, and we'll see the difference in real time. So our P tags are these 3 words, and that's about it, left, right, and center. So we'll see them right before the styles are added, and then on refresh when the styles are added. So if we go here and hit Okay, so they all turned blue. They're 16 pixels. Let's first change it from 16 pixels to 1.4 EM. Actually, first let's take it to 1 EM. You'll see no change. No change. And now if we do, because 1 EM equals 16 pixels, 1.4 EM, then we see the change right away. So if this is this is the default line height. Let's see if we can figure out what line height does by uncommenting this code, refreshing our code, and we see that looks like the space, maybe it's the height of the lines of letters. Let's look it up real quick. Go to W3 Schools. Select the line height for different. The line height property specifies the height of the line. So we'll just have to play around with that. It does help a lot. I use it a lot in my work. It helps readability by making the letters larger, I think, or the space around it. Either way, it's something that you will have to play with to get it just right. We'll add a lot of text later on. And actually, let's do it now. Go to lorem ipsum. And I'm going to grab this paragraph. Not that paragraph. It's being funny. This paragraph. I'm going to put it into my code. Inside a p tag, so it's going to be blue. And we see that it looks like this. If we were to inspect the element, we'll keep it here on screen. And let's change this line height to see what it does. That's 1. So see, everything is pressed together. 1.1 brings each line up. 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 seems like the good point, almost like double space on word. Let's see what happens when we go a little overboard. Oh, 0.5, everything starts to crash in. Actually looks kind of cool. Oh, you can get some weird effects like that. Let's do 2.5. Lots of space in between. So the line extends up. Cool. So let's refresh. Get rid of this element. And go on to the next step in our activity. So we added those. Now it's asking us to add text align center, which is going to align the text in the middle of the page. Let's see what that means. So in center, we're going to do text align center. And I'm also going to add a border of solid red 1px because I want to test something out. Okay, so the element is a block element, which means that it extends all the way across the page. So text center is going to center it not only within the page, but within the element as well, since they're one and the same. So it's going to be center no matter how big the screen is because it takes up the whole block. But if I were to say something like max width of center to be 200 pixels, we'll see that the element is smaller and center is in the center of the element, not the page. So don't rely too heavily on text align because it depends on the size of your container, not on the size of the page. So if you want something directly in the center of your page and your element is not the full width of your page, you will not get the intended effect. However, if you're just working within the container and you want to align it, you can do so. So that's what text align does. Let me get rid of these two. And it's testing our theory right now with the next direction, which is inside your .write class, change text align to right, and you probably can already tell what's going to happen there. There's our right over there. So it ended up looking pretty cool, left, center, and right. And that's the text align. Depends on the width of the container, of course, the div or the p tag or whatever it is that it's the parent of that or that class relates to. The next request, or the next instruction, is to include some stylings in the UL declaration. So ULs are unordered list via this item right here. What is it asking us to do? Text transform, lowercase. It's going to change everything through CSS in this text field to be lowercase. I believe everything was already lowercase. No, these L tags are going to change to lowercase as you just saw. Text decoration underline is going to add underlines. And list style, oops, did I spell that right? I don't think so. No, that's good. List style type to none, which is going to remove those black little balls on the left-hand side. So let's take a look. We already included the text transform lowercase in our last refresh, but now we're going to add a text decoration and a value of underline, which is going to add an underline to each of these. And then it's going to remove this styling right here, this bullets. So on refresh, we see that underlines are added and the bullets are gone. Change the list type to square. Watch what happens. Change the list type to circle. Okay, so none is just one of many options for this list style type property. We can change this to circle and the balls will be back, but they will be circular. I think that's what we already had. That's the default. No, not quite. They're circles, but they're not black in the middle. If we change them to square, I think we will see a dark color, but they will be square, right? And then by default, by not adding anything at all, we see what we're accustomed to seeing, which is those dots. Moving right along, some of these are easy to just look up if there's an exact effect that you're thinking about doing. If you make this list and these come by surprise to you, as they often do, list style type none is used a lot, and just getting the default behavior of this list without those dots is a common thing that people do. It's also a common thing people look up quite a bit because they forget how to do it. But those two things are one and the same. Just because there's something you do all the time and it's easy doesn't mean you necessarily remember it. So me as a developer, I'm often looking up, hey, how do I get rid of those dots again? It takes about a second. It's just part of the routine. Some of these are memorized, but some are not. I keep letting all my students know that it's okay to look things up. In fact, it's expected to be able to look things up, and efficiently. Just kind of have to say to yourself, hey, I did that before. What was it again? And then the things that you do memorize are memorized for a reason, and they're important to you and should be more mechanical. But that's always a give and take between those two parts of your brain. Next, we are going to add to the OL declaration down here, the ordered list, a new property, text decoration. So text decoration, which we've used before, line through. I think that's just like a strike through. Inside of the declaration, color blue. I think that's it for the ordered list. Let's just take a look. Yes, now they're all strike through in that ordered list, keeping the numbers. Inside of the 8, you're going to add color blue, which I think it already is, and transition 0.5 seconds all. Let's see what that does. Not quite sure yet. Okay, I think the transition is adding a transition length if a transition were to happen, and it's going to be triggered by this other property. Okay, so I see what we're doing here. So all A tags are by default. Let's actually say purple, so we can at least see one change. We see that our link tag over here is purple, and it has a transition, but because it's not transitioning to anything yet, that property is unused. There is this syntax we haven't seen before. The name for it is a pseudo class or a pseudo element. I'd have to look that up, but pretty much when you mouse hovers over this element, it's going to do the following. It's going to remove the styling that it has before, and replace it with whatever you put in this, and only happening when the transition happens. So had we not had this transition in here, it would immediately change to the color green, which is what we're changing it to. But because we've added this delay, it'll happen slower. So let's just take a look at what happens, right? So we understand that our A tag is here and our A hover tag is element is here. The same element, however, this is its default setting, and this is what it's going to change to, and this is how long it's going to take. This line is not always needed, but it's better. But let's just see all possible setups, right? So we have our transition, our initial color purple, and our hover class on our A elements. Let's take a look. Still purple, and on hover, red. Saw how it took about half a second? Let's change that to 3 seconds, and we'll count out loud. Ready? And we're hovering 1, 2, 3, and it's red. Remove that all together, and it should be immediate. As soon as you hover, bam, red. And you saw how it was kind of jarring and it's immediate. The reason people add the transition time is because if it slowly fades in, it looks more natural. But that's it for that. Hovers are a lot of fun. You could do all sorts of things. You could do things that are pretty drastic too, like, okay, I've left this at 3 seconds. I'm actually going to change it to 1.5. This will be able to feel, and we'll feel it pretty, I feel it smoother. We're going to change that font to 30px, and it's going to grow. 1 second might not even be enough time. But let's take a look. We're going to hover. You saw how that grew. We're going to see a lot more of that in the advanced CSS section, but that's really just commenting out. We're not doing line by line, but this one you can do now. You see that the transition applies to both ends. It applies to the hover over and the hover out, giving kind of a cool 90s feel to it. It can be used pretty well, and it is used a lot in modern web development. The next command and the last one is to change the active declaration to red. So hold on. I'll change the color so you can see the difference. This color, yellow. Now, if I'm not mistaken, active class is what happens after you've clicked it. So by default, it is purple. On hover, it's red. But if it gets clicked, hold on, I'm having some trouble with the transition here. Let me remove the transition altogether. Might be interrupting something. Right away. And I've clicked it. The link does not work. Let's see what happens when we actually add a value to that link. I'm going to set it equal to Google. I'm going to remove the size as well so I don't interrupt any of it. Just the color. That's all we really need. And what do we have? We have purple on hover red. It's clicked Google. If we head back, in theory this should have changed to yellow, but didn't quite work out. Let's research the active class in future lessons and see if there's definitely times that we use it, and it is one of the more important features of CSS. In this case, it is not applicable. And now for some fun. If you've gotten to this part, not only in the instructions will you see instructions about how to uncomment this code, you'll also see something you need to add to the P class. So first, if you're going through this lesson line by line, you'll see that once we got to this point down here, we have some commented code. So highlight all of it. Actually, let's do it the hard way. Just go here, delete that first comment, and then down here, delete the next one. Now we have a from and to, and a keyframes with an at slide in. This is advanced CSS. Pretty much it's going to add a nice visual effect. However, we need to add the following code. So go to the activities and copy and paste these 4 lines of code. Animation duration down to animation direction. And go to your P class and add them right down here. Make sure you put a semicolon there. And let's line this up. And let's take a look at what it did. left, center, and right are rotating back and forth on load. Looks like just the one time. Let's refresh and see if we can do it again. Looks awesome. Take a look at the notes to get some more information. Keyframes and advanced styles. And see if you can play around with some of these timings to change it up. And also perhaps slide in, slide out, alternating the direction. You'll be able to find more resources in W3 School. See if you can change this. I would also add maybe the font size or the color. Let's just get an example of what you could do if you really wanted to test it out. I want the size to increase on the slide in of the font, and I want that color to be red. So let's just see what happens with those small changes, and I recommend you add more just to play around with it. So we'll reload. And we saw it go from blue to green, and then finally turn to red, and the font size increases. So play around with that, and I'll see you in the next lesson.